With the announcement of all the changes in X-Men 97, the internet's been on fire with a left and right fight at this point over what X-Men is and should be. Of course, the left is going crazy out there going,
"It's always been woke, you bigots, and it's always been about anti-bigotry, and now your bigotry is just on display with this non-binary self-insert character."
We've already covered about how Morph has been changed and is now, as a shapeshifter, being a non-binary character. And of course, that is a self-insert, which we covered in our video yesterday too. Make sure to go watch that because we have news that really nobody else covered. I'm very shocked that that didn't get out there so much. But at the end of the day, this debate is what's being talked about everywhere. I've seen Eric July do videos about it. Others do videos about it. And we're going to talk about why Stan Lee and Chris Claremont did not intend the X-Men to be woke. This is a modern revisionist thing that's happening right now. And of course, we'll get into the news. My name's John Delarose. I'm a #1 best-selling author and award-winning comic creator, and I make non-woke comics. I have a really beautiful one on Kickstarter right now called All Eyes on Ashley. And this one's done with Mike S. Miller on the art. We just finished things up and it is ready to go to print right now. We got 9 days left on the campaign. Don't miss this. I made a wonderful book. I really can't spoil too much of what's inside of it. You're going to absolutely enjoy it. If you like comics, if you like fun, just trust me on this. We delivered something awesome. If you backed my Overmind or my Flying Sparks before, you know that we write a competent story here. Just you have to understand that we're doing something a little bit different, a little bit off genre, but it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. And so please check this out. Like I said, 9 days off to support this comic. We'll have this link in the description below for you. Really appreciate everybody who's backed so far. You're going to get something awesome, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so here is our article on the day on Fandom Pulse. No, Stan Lee and Chris Claremont didn't always intend the X-Men to be woke. And of course, this is what they're alleging now. We've seen new pictures of Rogue, who's, been de-feminized, of course, with her uniboob and all that. And we know, of course, about the Morph controversy that's out there. But they always say that this has always been some civil rights thing. It's always been about the blacks, right? That's what they're always refer to. And they say that, of course, the first thing that they talk about is Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and that Professor X and Magneto are just some allegory for that. Magneto's not even really a villain. Well, this was a narrative that was crafted much later. This was actually purported in the 80s and 90s. Now, Stan Lee did actually change that narrative in the 80s and 90s when X-Men became a hugely popular property. But if you look at what X-Men was back in the day, it was very much a similar thing to Avengers or Fantastic Four. He had a very big deal with his team book, Fantastic Four. It was huge. And so he launched both Avengers and X-Men to try to capitalize on that being a thing. And so he just made a few characters with some, pretty basic powers. You got Angel, who flies. You got Cyclops with his little eye beams. You got Jean Grey, who's a telepath. And you got Beast, who's just kind of your strong man who can do acrobatics and stuff like that. They all look like, and Iceman, of course, who's, the Human Torch, but the opposite, right? And so you just have that going on there with Professor X in the background leading the team. And Professor X, people say, is a copy off of the Doom Patrol leader, which was a very popular comic at the time as well. I don't know if that's the case at all, but you know what? Stan Lee has been known for kind of course, lifting some certain concepts. So that's all this really was. And if you look on the other side of things, Magneto was not some sort of civil rights leader in this. He was literally the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants leader, right? They literally called it Evil Mutants, and they were out there to do evil and to destroy things, and the X-Men pretty much just had to stop them for the first 20 issues there. Almost every series issue was just the X-Men find Magneto at a circus, and he's messing with things. Go stop him. And that's all it was. There really wasn't some deep, allegorical Martin Luther King sort of vision here at all. It was absolutely not the case whatsoever. It was a kid's book. And that's what X-Men was all about. Now, of course, like I said, Stan Lee changed that later. He eventually said that he never viewed Magneto as a villain, but he absolutely did. Now, the characters were not even based off of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King at all. They were actually based on Jewish leaders who were named David Ben-Gurion and Menachem Begin. I hope I pronounced that right. But I don't know who they are, but that's who Stan Lee originally said that they were based off of. And it makes sense. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee were both Jews. They weren't black people. So they weren't really involved in the black civil rights thing as much as everybody wants to pretend they were later as some sort of boomer hippie cred thing in the arts. And that's what they were attempting to capture later on. Now, Chris Claremont took over the X-Men eventually, and he changed the team quite a bit. Completely new people with Wolverine, Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Nightcrawler. But if you look at what that was, while there was like representation, you had like Storm as the African, you had Colossus was a Russian, you had Nightcrawler as a German. It was more like a representation of like, you know, the nations of the UN and saying, hey, we are going to be more of a United Nations. We're all going to work together. It was really just some like kind of a nod to Star Trek, if anything. If you look at the way Gene Roddenberry assembled his crew, you know, he thought about it and he was like, hey, you know, in the future, you know, we're going to be the Earth out there exploring against aliens. It doesn't make sense that we'd have like just an American crew. So we'll have a Russian on the crew. And that's kind of how he did things. And of course, it was modeled after the UN and being a United Nations. And that's exactly what this was here. Again, it wasn't some big civil rights sort of concept. It was just a, hey, these are a bunch of different people, and we're going to just end up working together, especially if we are a group of mutants traveling the world and fighting against evil and things like that. This is going to be a worldwide problem-solving sort of thing. It was much more interesting in scope than just trying to make some allegory about Martin Luther King and making it American politics. So they didn't do that. But of course, everybody likes to pretend they did, and now they pretend that was about the black civil rights, and now it's about the gay civil rights. And this just is one thing that leads to another. Well, how insulting is it to black people? One, that they're getting these people who like go out there into the streets dancing around half naked in front of kids, and of course waving their genitals around in these like rainbow flags, compared to like, you know, what was happening as far as like civil rights stuff in the 60s. That's another story. But of course, this is not the intention of anything in the books either. Chris Claremont actually went to a gay convention in 2012. It was called FlameCon. Yep, for real, FlameCon. Not FlamerCon, just FlameCon. And he started talking about it, and he was trying to virtue signal to the audience there, and being like, I love you guys. You guys are the best. I love my queer audience, of course, right? But even then, he had to admit that it had nothing to do with the LGBTQ anything when he was writing this. He actually said that this was not the focus whatsoever, that it was never a stand-in for the LGBTQ community. And then this is what he said to try to pacify the audience there. He said, you know, there's a space between every panel. You can go wherever you want. Who am I to get in the way? And this is what fan fiction really is all about. These people just kind of make up, you know, what's going on in between the panels or off screen with things. And that's your little headcanon thing. If you want to enjoy that, he says, hey, enjoy what you want. I'm not here to like tell you what to enjoy or how to enjoy my books. I'm just happy that you enjoy my books. And that's really how people used to be at the end of the day. Things have changed in the recent years with the mainstream comic book industry. It's you agree with my politics now or else. And that's exactly how it is in these sort of things. They're telling you, like Rick Remender, who wrote X-Force about 10 years ago, said, you know, don't buy my books if you voted for Trump. That's the difference between somebody who's classy like Chris Claremont and somebody like Rick Remender who's just a woke activist. And that everybody who works at Marvel now is a woke activist who's perpetuating this kind of nonsense. And that's the whole problem in comics. But again, X-Men was not a woke comic book. It was an action-adventure book for little boys, and that's really what it was about at the end of the day. Sorry, wokeites. Suck it. All right. Leave a comment down below with what you think about this. Hit the like and subscribe button, and make sure to back All Eyes on Ashley right now. You'll love this. And again, this is a wonderful comic that has no woke content in it. It is just quality stuff. Thanks so much.